The council chamber floated in the darkness of space like a crystal jewel. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their specialized environments. Some breathed methane, others lived in water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy contained in magnetic bottles. They had all gathered for one reason: to discuss the end of humanity. Ambassador Elena Kowalski sat in the human section, her face calm as she listened to the debates around her. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, wearing the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Her hands rested on the desk in front of her, not moving, not fidgeting. She simply waited. On the massive holographic display at the center of the chamber, a nightmare approached. The Vraxis swarm moved through space like a living plague. Billions of insect-like drones surrounded 6 enormous bioships, each one the size of a small moon. The ships were alive, grown rather than built, with armor made of organic materials harder than titanium. They pulsed with a sickly green light as they traveled. Counselor Thexval of the Delphinians spoke first. His species lived in water and resembled large, intelligent dolphins with arms. His voice came through the translation system as a series of clicks and whistles turned into words. The projections are clear. Humanity's defenses will collapse in 6 weeks at most. We have seen this pattern before. The Vraxis consume everything in their path. An Ethanor representative shimmered next to him. The Ethanor were crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns. 17 civilizations have fallen to the swarm, species with far more advanced technology than the humans. Species who have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. The humans have only been in space for 152 years. They are children playing with toys they barely understand. Elena listened without expression. She had heard variations of this speech many times over the past 3 days. The elder species of the galaxy loved to remind humanity how young and inexperienced they were, how primitive, how unprepared for the dangers that lurked between the stars. A lumine floated near the ceiling, its energy form contained in a field that glowed soft purple. We should focus on evacuation. How many humans can we relocate before the swarm arrives? Which colony worlds should we prioritize? None of them, another voice said. The Vraxis moved too fast. Any evacuation effort would be incomplete. Billions would die anyway. Perhaps it would be more merciful to offer humanity the chance to surrender. The swarm sometimes allows a species to join them, to become part of the hive mind. Elena felt her jaw tighten but kept her face neutral. These so-called advanced species were discussing humanity's extinction as if they were planning a dinner menu. Some seemed genuinely sympathetic, but sympathy without action meant nothing. Thexval turned his large, intelligent eyes toward the human section. Ambassador Kowalski, does your government have a response to our proposals? Elena stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. She walked to the center of the speaking area, her boots clicking on the crystalline floor. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. We don't need 6 weeks, she said. We'll handle the Vraxis problem in under 12 hours. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then the chamber erupted in noise. Counselors shouted in dozens of languages, creating a chaos of sound that the translation system struggled to process. The Ethanor representative flashed so brightly that several species had to dim their visual sensors. Thexval raised his voice above the others. Ambassador, I understand you are under stress, but making impossible claims helps no one. This is not a time for bravado or species pride. Accept the reality of your situation. Elena's eyes were cold as she looked at him. Counselor, my species has been fighting wars since we lived in caves and threw rocks at each other. We've had 10,000 years to perfect the art of killing. We've destroyed cities, poisoned entire regions, and built weapons capable of rendering our own planet uninhabitable. We know warfare in ways you cannot imagine. An older counselor from a peaceful herbivore species made a sad sound. And this is precisely why younger species are so dangerous. You think violence solves everything? No, Elena corrected. We know violence solves specific things, and the Vraxis swarm is one of those things. She gestured to the holographic display. You've all fought the Vraxis using traditional tactics, fleet engagements, defensive lines, fortified worlds, and you've all failed because you're fighting them like you fight each other, like civilized species having a disagreement. She walked closer to the display, studying the swarm of ships. But the Vraxis aren't civilized. They're not interested in negotiation or surrender or peaceful coexistence. They want to consume and assimilate, so you can't fight them with civilization's rules. Thexaval's fins flattened against his body, a sign of agitation. What are you suggesting? That we've been preparing for this since the day we met you, Elena said. Since the day we learned about the Vraxis and heard all your stories about how unstoppable they are. While you were telling us about proper fleet formations and defensive protocols, we were studying what actually matters. We learned from your mistakes. All of them. A junior counselor from a bird-like species chirped nervously. You cannot possibly defeat a force that has destroyed civilizations millions of years older than yours. Elena smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Watch us. She returned to her seat as the council chamber dissolved into argument again. Some demanded she be censured for wasting their time. Others seemed curious despite themselves. The Delphinians looked deeply concerned, as if they had just realized something disturbing. On the holographic display, the Vraxis swarm crossed into human-controlled space. The exact moment was recorded by dozens of sensors. 3 billion drones accompanied the 6 planet-killer bioships. Their destination was clear. New Perth, a human colony with a population of 2.4 million people. The display showed no human military response. No fleet moved to intercept. No defensive perimeter formed around the colony. New Perth hadn't even begun evacuation procedures. The colonists were going about their normal lives as if they didn't know death was approaching. Thexval made a sound of distress. They're not even defending themselves. The colony will be consumed within hours. But Elena sat calmly in her seat, watching a small timer on her personal display. It showed the elapsed time since the Vraxis entered human space. 0 hours, 0 minutes, 37 seconds. She thought about the secret facilities on Luna, the hidden weapons platforms throughout the Sol system, and the teams of military strategists who had been planning this moment for decades. Humanity had learned many things from the elder species of the galaxy. They had learned about faster-than-light travel, about energy shields, about genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. But more importantly, they had learned what not to do. They had studied every species that fell to the Vraxis and identified the pattern of failure. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity had learned from thousands of years of fighting itself. The Galactic Council watched their displays, expecting to witness humanity's extinction. They had no idea they were about to witness something far more disturbing. A species that had turned warfare into a science, and war crimes into military doctrine. Elena checked her timer again. 4 minutes had passed. The Vraxis swarm was accelerating toward New Perth, confident in their inevitable victory. She allowed herself a small, grim smile. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. 47 minutes after the Vraxis swarm entered human space, New Perth's star flickered. It was a small change, barely noticeable, but every sensor in the Galactic Council chamber registered it immediately. Thexval's fin stood straight up in alarm. What was that? Did something just happen to the star? The Delphinian scientists worked frantically at their stations analyzing the data. When the lead scientist looked up, his face showed pure shock. Someone detonated an explosive device inside the star's outer corona. The energy release triggered a massive solar flare. The council chamber filled with gasps and exclamations of disbelief. On the holographic display, they watched as a wave of radiation erupted from the star and rushed outward. The flare was enormous but strangely precise. It traveled on an exact trajectory, aimed directly at the approaching Vraxis swarm. An Ethnor representative flashed in agitation. That's impossible. No species can detonate weapons inside a star. The heat would destroy any device before it could function. Unless, Elena said quietly from her seat, you use weapons designed to survive that heat for exactly long enough to trigger the reaction you need. She stood and walked back to the center area. We call them stellar mines. We've had them deployed around New Perth's star for 6 years. The radiation wave hit the Vraxis swarm like a tsunami of energy. The drones didn't die. Their organic armor was too strong, too well evolved to resist radiation. But something else happened instead. The communications between the drones went completely silent. On the tactical display, the Vraxis swarm lost all coordination. Individual drones continued moving forward, but the perfect formation broke apart. The bioships kept broadcasting commands, but nothing responded. The hive mind had gone temporarily blind and deaf. 8 minutes, Elena said, watching her timer. The radiation interferes with their biological communication frequencies for 8.3 minutes. We tested this on captured Vraxis scouts 15 years ago. We've known about this weakness longer than most of you have known about us. Before any counselor could respond, the human fleet struck. They came from behind New Perth, where they had been hiding in the planet's sensor shadow. But these weren't traditional warships. The fleet consisted of millions of small drones, each one about the size of a car. Thexval stared at the display. Those are too small to carry effective weapons. What are they doing? They're not carrying weapons, Elena explained. They're carrying communication hacks. While the Vraxis can't hear their own hive mind, our drones are connecting directly to individual Vraxis ships and uploading new instructions. Illumini pulsed with confusion. You can't hack organic systems. The Vraxis are biological, not mechanical. Everything that processes information can be hacked if you understand its language, Elena said. The Vraxis communicate through bioelectric signals. We captured some of their scouts decades ago and spent years learning how they think, how they communicate, how they process commands from the hive mind. We can speak their language now. We can give them orders. On the display, roughly 30% of the forward Vraxis drones suddenly turned on their own fleet. They attacked the bioships with the same mindless efficiency they used to attack everything else. Confusion spread through the swarm as the hive mind reconnected and found a third of its forces no longer responding to its commands. The council chamber was completely silent. Every species watched as humanity's unconventional tactics tore into the Vraxis formation. The drones that remained under hive mind control tried to destroy their corrupted brothers, creating chaos throughout the swarm. An elderly counselor from a peaceful species finally spoke, his voice shaking. You weaponized the star. You hacked into living creatures and turned them into weapons. What kind of species thinks like this? Elena turned to face him directly. The kind that's been fighting itself for 10,000 years. We've had chemical warfare, biological warfare, nuclear warfare, and cyber warfare. We've fought in every environment our planet offers, using every tool we could imagine. We know how to turn anything into a weapon because we've had to. We've fought each other so long that we've learned every dirty trick, every unconventional tactic, every way to exploit an enemy's weakness. She gestured to the display. You all fought the Vraxis with honor, with traditional fleet tactics and straightforward battles. You lost because you were fighting fair. Humanity learned a long time ago that fair fights are for sports and games. Real wars are won by cheating better than the enemy. Thexval made a sound that the translation system interpreted as distress. But the ethics, the moral implications of such tactics. We're alive to debate ethics because we use these tactics, Elena replied. The 17 civilizations the Vraxis consumed were probably more ethical than us. They were definitely more honorable. They're also extinct. On the display, the Vraxis swarm began to reorganize. The hive mind was adapting, cutting off the compromised drones and reforming its lines. The bioships released electromagnetic pulses that disabled many of the human hacking drones. The battle was far from over. Then the sensors showed something new. More Vraxis ships were emerging from hyperspace, much more. 3 additional planet-killer bioships appeared, each one larger than the first 6. They were accompanied by 15 billion additional drones. The council chamber erupted in panic. Several species began broadcasting emergency messages to their homeworlds. A junior counselor actually fainted, his environmental suit's medical systems immediately activating to revive him. It's over, Thexval said, his voice hollow. Even with your tactics, you cannot fight that. Those are the Vraxis reserves. They only deploy reserves when they consider a target to be genuinely dangerous. You've made them angry, Ambassador. They're going to destroy Earth itself now. The new Vraxis fleet ignored New Perth completely. They had a new target, and every sensor confirmed their destination. Earth, humanity's homeworld. The planet where 10 billion humans lived. Elena checked her timer. 2 hours and 51 minutes since the Vraxis entered human space. She looked at the display showing the massive enemy fleet heading for Earth and smiled. Right on schedule, she said. Thexval turned to her in disbelief. Schedule? You planned for this? Of course, Elena said calmly. The Vraxis are predictable once you understand their psychology. They're a hive mind, which means they think in specific patterns. When you hurt them, they respond with overwhelming force against your most valuable target. They did the same thing to the Delphinians 1,000 years ago. They did it to the Ethner. They do it to everyone. She walked back to her seat. We studied all your encounters with the Vraxis. Every battle, every defeat, we built psychological profiles of how the hive mind thinks and reacts. Then we created a situation designed to trigger a specific response. We made them angry at New Perth so they would commit their reserves against Earth. But why? An Ethanor asked, flashing in confusion. Why would you want them to attack your home world? Elena sat down and folded her hands on her desk. Because Earth isn't just our home. It's the most heavily defended location in human space, and we've spent 80 years preparing for exactly this attack. The display showed the Vraxis fleet accelerating to maximum speed, racing toward Earth with the fury of an angry god. The human ships in their path scattered and fled, apparently in retreat. Thexval watched humanity's fleet running away. They're retreating. They know they cannot win. But Elena just watched her timer and said nothing. 3 hours had passed since the Vraxis entered human space. The real battle was about to begin, and the Galactic Council had no idea what humanity had built in secret around their homeworld. The trap wasn't at New Perth. It had never been at New Perth. That colony was just bait to make the Vraxis do exactly what humans wanted. And now the enemy was rushing headlong into the kill zone that humanity had spent nearly a century preparing. Elena thought about the weapons waiting in Earth's orbit and felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. The elder species were about to learn why humanity's favorite military strategy was called defeating yourself first. If you could survive fighting yourself for 10,000 years, fighting anyone else became much simpler. The Vraxis swarm approached Earth like a tidal wave of death. 15 billion drones surrounded the 3 massive bioships, moving in perfect coordination. The hive mind controlling them was ancient and experienced. It had consumed civilizations across the galaxy for 4,000 years. It had learned to recognize every defensive tactic, every weapon system, every trick that organic species used to fight. But as it entered the space around Earth's moon, the hive mind encountered something it had never experienced before: confusion. Deep in the command center of the primary bioship, the Vraxis consciousness reached out to coordinate its forces. It expected to find the simple, predictable patterns of prey defending themselves. Instead, something reached back. Human hackers, their minds enhanced with quantum computing interfaces, were inside the Vraxis network. They weren't just disrupting the communication, they were flooding it with information. Massive amounts of information. Data that the hive mind couldn't ignore or filter out. Images poured into the Vraxis consciousness. Pictures of human history, not the peaceful parts or the achievements. Only the violence. Only the wars. The Vraxis saw humans fighting with bronze swords, killing each other over territorial disputes. It saw chemical weapons deployed in trenches, soldiers dying in agony as their lungs dissolved. It watched nuclear weapons vaporize entire cities in seconds. It witnessed biological plagues designed by humans to kill other humans. It observed wars fought with artificial intelligence, with genetic weapons, with nanomachines that disassembled human bodies at the molecular level. 10,000 years of warfare. Thousands of conflicts. Billions of dead. All documented. All studied. All learned from. In the Galactic Council chamber, the Ethanor xenopsychologist was the first to understand what was happening. Her crystalline form flashed rapidly as she processed the data. They're not fighting a military battle. They're conducting psychological warfare against a hive mind. They're trying to make it feel fear. Thexval looked at her in confusion. Can the Vraxis even experience fear? They're a collective intelligence. Individual drones have no sense of self-preservation. The hive mind has self-preservation, the xenopsychologist explained. It's just distributed across billions of units. And it's encountering something it's never seen before. Not prey, not another species defending itself. It's seeing apex predators. On the display, 3 of the smaller Vraxis bioships suddenly changed course. They weren't advancing toward Earth anymore. They were retreating, jumping to hyperspace and fleeing back toward the galactic rim. The council chamber fell silent. Nobody had ever seen the Vraxis retreat before. Elena watched from her seat, her expression unchanged. The Vraxis evolved to consume other species. They're optimized for hunting prey. But humans aren't prey. We're persistence hunters. We're pack predators. We're the species that hunted megafauna to extinction, with nothing but sharp sticks and the ability to run for days without stopping. A junior counselor made a sound of protest. But you're also prey. Humans have been hunted by larger predators throughout your evolution. Exactly, Elena agreed. We understand both perspectives. We know how predators think because we are predators. We know how prey thinks because we've been prey. That makes us very good at finding weaknesses. On the tactical display, the Vraxis hive mind was reorganizing. The psychological attack had made it cautious but not defeated. The remaining bioships tightened their formation and committed their reserves. 15 billion drones launched from the bioships, creating a cloud of death that accelerated toward Earth. The council members began broadcasting evacuation alerts to their species. Several started composing memorial messages for humanity. The sheer number of Vraxis drones was overwhelming. No defense could stop that many attackers. Then Earth's moon opened. Massive hangar doors slid apart across Luna's surface. Thousands of them. They had been hidden so perfectly that even the Council's advanced sensors hadn't detected them. From each hangar, enormous mirror arrays deployed. They unfolded in space like metallic flowers, each mirror perfectly positioned. Within seconds, the mirrors aligned. They caught the light from Earth's sun and focused it, not into a single beam, but into hundreds of precisely calculated streams of concentrated solar radiation. But the mirrors weren't targeting the Vraxis ships. They were heating specific points in the space between Earth and the approaching swarm. The thin interstellar medium, normally near absolute zero, began to heat up. Millions of degrees in seconds. The hydrogen and helium atoms that floated in the vacuum became plasma, creating barriers of superheated matter. Thexval stared at the display in horror. They're weaponizing their own star, creating plasma walls in space. The Vraxis bioships tried to slow down, but they were moving too fast. Their organic propulsion systems couldn't decelerate quickly enough. The lead bioship hit the first plasma barrier, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The armor that had protected it from conventional weapons for millennia evaporated instantly. The bioship's outer layers boiled away as it encountered temperatures found in the core of stars. The second and third bioships tried to alter course, but the plasma barriers were positioned in a grid pattern. There was nowhere to go. All three planet-killer bioships died screaming. The Vraxis hive mind felt their destruction as a physical pain, the loss of such large portions of itself like having limbs torn off. But the 15 billion drones were smaller, more maneuverable. They adjusted their trajectories, flowing around the plasma barriers like water around rocks. They continued their approach to Earth, and their numbers were still overwhelming. The human ships continued to retreat. There seemed to be no defense against this many attackers. The council members watched in grim silence, certain they were about to witness Earth's destruction. At 3 hours and 47 minutes, every human ship simultaneously broadcast a single word. The translation system struggled with it, because it wasn't in any human language. It was in the Vraxis bio-language, the chemical and electrical signals the hive mind used to communicate. The word was simple: eat. The space between Luna and Earth erupted with light. The sensors in the council chamber went temporarily offline from the overload of data. When they came back online, the display showed something impossible. The 15 billion Vraxis drones were dissolving. Their organic armor was breaking apart at the molecular level. Their bodies came apart like sandcastles in a wave. In seconds, billions of drones became clouds of component atoms. The Delphinian xenobiologist made a sound of pure terror. That's a Grey Goo scenario. That's a Drexler cascade. That's banned by 17 separate treaties. That's a doomsday weapon. Elena stood and faced the council. We seeded this entire orbital space with self-replicating nanomachines. They're programmed with one instruction: disassemble any carbon-based matter they encounter and use it to create more of themselves. An Ethnor flashed in panic. Those machines will consume everything. They'll destroy your planet. They'll spread throughout your solar system. Once they start replicating, they cannot be stopped. Yes, they can, Elena corrected. Each nanomachine has a built-in replication limit. They're also programmed to recognize specific chemical markers that we've distributed throughout Earth's biosphere. They'll disassemble the Vraxis drones, but they'll go inert when they encounter anything from Earth. We've been testing this system for 30 years. Thexval's voice was barely a whisper. You built a doomsday weapon. You risked a Grey Goo scenario that could have sterilized your entire system. What if your calculations were wrong? What if the nanomachines mutated or malfunctioned? Elena's expression was cold. Then we would have died. But the Vraxis would have died first, and that's what matters. You need to understand something about humanity, Counselor. We're not afraid of mutually assured destruction. We lived with nuclear weapons pointed at ourselves for generations. We've accepted the risk of extinction before, and will accept it again if necessary. On the display, the last Vraxis drone dissolved into atoms. The nanomachine swarm, having consumed all available Vraxis matter and reached their replication limits, went inert. They floated in space as harmless dust. The Galactic Council chamber was completely silent. The elder species, who had been traveling the stars for millennia, had just watched a species barely out of its own solar system deploy weapons that violated every ethical standard the galaxy had established. Illumini finally pulsed a question. What would you have done if the nanomachines hadn't worked? Elena's answer was immediate. We have nuclear-pumped gamma-ray lasers in orbit around Jupiter. If the nanomachines failed, we would have used those. If those failed, we have antimatter weapons stored in the asteroid belt. If those failed, we have plans to collapse our own sun and turn it into a weapon. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or sensors or energy fields of every species present. You asked what kind of species thinks like this. I'll tell you. We're the kind of species that would rather destroy ourselves than surrender. We're the kind that turns everything into a weapon. We're the kind that's been fighting for so long that warfare isn't something we do, it's something we are. The timer showed 4 hours and 12 minutes. The Vraxis swarm that had destroyed 17 civilizations was broken, but Elena knew the war wasn't over yet. One bioship remained, the last Vraxis bioship hung in space near Neptune, damaged and alone. For the first time in 4,000 years, the hive mind was truly isolated. Every other bioship was destroyed. Every drone was gone. The vast consciousness that had once controlled billions of units now existed in a single vessel. Inside that ship, the Vraxis hive mind was experiencing something new. Something it had no name for in its biological memory. The humans would have called it fear, but the Vraxis only knew it as a desperate need to survive. In the Galactic Council chamber, every sensor focused on the damaged bioship. The counselors expected humanity to finish what they started. One ship remained, one more target to destroy. The logical action was obvious. Instead, a single small human corvette approached the bioship. It was unarmed, according to sensors. It broadcast no threats. It simply drifted closer, moving slowly and carefully. Thexaval watched in confusion. What are they doing? Why don't they destroy it? Elena Kowalski walked to the center of the chamber. Because destroying the last bioship accomplishes nothing. The Vraxis will just return in a few centuries with new ships and new drones. We need to do something more permanent. On the display, the Corvette stopped a safe distance from the bioship. A communication channel opened. Ambassador Kowalski herself appeared on the transmission, broadcasting directly to the Vraxis consciousness. You have two choices, Elena said, her voice calm but firm. Die here or retreat beyond the galactic rim and never return. If you choose life, you will tell every species you encounter that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not a target. The Vraxis consciousness processed this. It had never been given choices before. It had never needed to negotiate. It existed to consume and expand. That was its nature, coded into every cell of its being. Elena continued speaking. We know what you are. You're not evil. You're not cruel. You're a species doing what your evolution programmed you to do. But evolution isn't destiny. We humans were programmed to fight each other, to compete for resources, to kill for territory. We learned to override those instincts when necessary. You can too. She leaned closer to the camera. Or you can die here and we'll make sure every other Vraxis bioship knows what happened. We'll hunt down every part of your species until the galaxy forgets you ever existed. We have the weapons to do it. We have the will to do it. And unlike you, we won't stop until the job is finished. The Vraxis hive mind calculated rapidly. It reviewed its memories of the battle. The stellar flare that disabled its communications. The hacked drones that turned against their own forces. The plasma barriers that destroyed the bioships. The nanomachines that dissolved 15 billion drones in seconds. This species was different. Other civilizations had fought with honor, with restraint, with rules of warfare. The humans had no such limitations. They would use anything, sacrifice anything, destroy anything to win. The hive mind recognized something familiar in their tactics, the ruthless efficiency of a successful predator. After a long silence, the Vraxis bioship activated its hyperspace drive. It jumped away from Neptune, away from Earth, away from human space. The sensors tracked its exit vector. It was heading for extragalactic space, beyond the rim of the galaxy where no known civilization existed. The timer in Elena's display showed 4 hours and 58 minutes. 2 minutes under her promised 12-hour deadline. The council chamber remained silent for several heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. The Lumini representative pulsed with anger. This is unacceptable. Humanity has deployed weapons of mass destruction. They've violated the sapient technology accords. They've threatened the stability of galactic civilization. An Ethanor elder flashed in agreement. They've shown themselves to be dangerous. Too dangerous to remain unchecked. We must take action immediately. Thexaval raised his voice above the others. I propose immediate sanctions against humanity. A complete trade embargo. Mandatory weapons inspections. Supervised dismantling of their most dangerous systems. They cannot be allowed to keep weapons like those nanomachines or stellar mines. More voices joined in. The peaceful herbivore species demanded that humanity be expelled from the council entirely. The aquatic delphinians suggested a military coalition to contain human expansion. Even some of the younger species, who had previously been friendly to humanity, now called for restrictions and oversight. Elena let them argue for exactly 11 minutes. She stood at the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind her back, face expressionless. She looked like a soldier at attention, waiting for orders that would never come. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. We have just eliminated in under 5 hours a threat that has terrified the galaxy for 4,000 years. The chamber fell silent. We did it with minimal casualties, Elena continued. 2,341 human military personnel died in this operation. 0 civilian deaths on any human world. 0 civilian casualties among allied species. Even the Vraxis had no civilian deaths because they don't have civilians. They're all soldiers. She walked slowly around the chamber's center, making eye contact with different counselors. We used asymmetric warfare. We used strategic thinking. And yes, we used horrifying weapons. We built those weapons because when we joined this council 15 years ago, we asked a simple question. How do we defend ourselves against the Vraxis? Elena stopped walking and faced Thexaval directly. Do you remember what you told us, counselor? You said we couldn't. You said the Vraxis were inevitable. You said we should hope they didn't find us, and that if they did, we should pray for a quick death. The Ethaners said the same thing. So did the Lumini. So did every elder species in this chamber. She gestured to the empty display where the Vraxis bioship had been. We didn't pray. We didn't hope. We prepared. We took our worst qualities as a species, our violence and our paranoia and our refusal to surrender, and we turned them into weapons. You're all horrified by what we did? Good. You should be. An elderly counselor from a peaceful species spoke softly. You've crossed lines that should never be crossed. You've built weapons that could destroy all life in a solar system. How can we trust you not to use those weapons on us? Elena's expression softened slightly. Because we don't want to. We didn't build these weapons because we enjoy violence. We built them because the alternative was extinction. Every weapon system we deployed today was designed with one purpose: stopping the Vraxis. Not conquering neighbors, not enforcing our will on other species' survival. She paused, then continued. But here's what you need to understand. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to dismantle our defenses. We're not going to let you inspect our military facilities. We're not going to accept sanctions or embargoes or any attempt to limit our sovereignty. Thexaval's fins stood straight up in shock. You can't refuse council mandates. That's not how galactic civilization works. Then maybe galactic civilization needs to change, Elena replied. Because we just proved that your entire military doctrine is obsolete. Everything you thought you knew about warfare is wrong. The Vraxis proved that when they destroyed 17 advanced civilizations. We proved it when we stopped them in 5 hours. Illumini pulsed angrily. You're threatening the council? No, Elena said firmly. I'm stating facts. We've already had 17 different species contact us privately, asking for defense treaties. They want human military advisors. They want to learn our tactics. Some are even asking if they can purchase our weapon systems. She looked around the chamber. The Vraxis are gone, but there are other threats in the galaxy. Pirates, rogue AI, unknown dangers in unexplored space. You need us more than we need you. That's not a threat. That's reality. Thexval made a sound of distress. So what happens now? You become the new threat we all fear? Elena shook her head. No, we become your ally. We share our knowledge. We help defend species who can't defend themselves. But we do it on our terms, not yours. We're not children who need supervision. We're not a young species who doesn't understand the galaxy. She walked back to the human section and stood at her desk. You called us young, arrogant, ignorant. You were wrong about all of it. We're not a young species. We're an old species that's been fighting since we lived in caves. We've just been in space for a short time. We brought 10,000 years of warfare with us when we reached the stars. Elena sat down and folded her hands on her desk. The galaxy needs to understand something. Humanity doesn't hope for peace. We don't pray for it. We enforce it. We make it happen through strength and preparation and the willingness to do whatever is necessary. She looked directly at the council members. And if you're very lucky, you'll never see what we're truly capable of when we feel genuinely threatened. Today was us being careful. Today was us showing restraint. The Vraxes got to see humanity being merciful. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Every species in the chamber was recalculating their relationship with humanity. Some with fear, some with respect, some with both. 6 months passed after the 5-hour war. The Galactic Council established a new research institute with a name that spoke volumes about what had changed: the Human Studies Institute. Its stated purpose was to understand how a relatively young species could deploy such devastating military capabilities. Its real purpose was fear management. The institute occupied an entire space station near the council chambers. Researchers from 40 different species worked there, analyzing every aspect of human history, psychology, and military development. What they discovered disturbed them more than the weapons themselves. Dr. Valkesh, a Delphinian xenopsychologist, presented his findings to a closed council session. His report was classified at the highest level. Only the senior counselors from each species were allowed to attend. We've completed our analysis, Valkesh began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into words. The question we sought to answer was simple. How did humanity defeat the Vraxes so quickly? What we discovered is that they didn't win the war in 5 hours. They've been winning it for 10,000 years. The counselors looked at each other in confusion. Valkesh displayed a holographic timeline of human history. Every war humans have fought has been practice. Every weapon they developed was a step toward something more devastating. Every defeat taught them lessons they applied to the next conflict. He highlighted specific points on the timeline. When humans discovered gunpowder, they didn't just use it for fireworks. They immediately weaponized it. When they split the atom, the first use wasn't generating power. It was making bombs. When they developed computer networks, one of their first concerns was how to attack and defend those networks. An Ethner counselor flashed a question. But all species develop weapons. What makes humans different? The scale and persistence, Valkesh replied. Most species develop weapons for defense. Humans develop weapons for offense, defense, deterrence, and psychological impact. They don't just ask, can we kill our enemy? They ask, can we kill our enemy so thoroughly that everyone else is too afraid to become our enemy? He displayed images from human history, ancient battles, medieval sieges, modern warfare. But more importantly, humans have been fighting themselves continuously, not occasional conflicts between different species on their world, but constant, unending warfare between members of their own species. They've spent millennia perfecting the art of killing other humans. A peaceful herbivore species representative made a distressed sound. That sounds like a mental illness, a species-wide trauma. Perhaps, Valkesh agreed, but it's also made them extremely effective at warfare. When they encountered the Vraxes, they weren't learning how to fight for the first time. They were applying 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge to a new enemy. He changed the display to show the battle with the Vraxes. Notice their tactics. Stellar flares as weapons, communication hacking, psychological warfare, nanomachine swarms. These aren't innovations they developed after meeting the Vraxes. These are concepts they'd already theorized, tested, or deployed against each other. Thexval, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. So what are you saying? That humanity is fundamentally a warrior species? I'm saying they're a survivor species, Valkesh corrected. They've survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and their own self-destructive tendencies. They've survived by being paranoid, aggressive, and creative. They assume everything is dangerous until proven otherwise. They prepare for worst-case scenarios, and they never ever give up. He closed the display. The Vraxis were predictable because they'd succeeded for so long. They had a pattern and they didn't deviate from it. Humans studied that pattern and built a trap. They sacrificed a colony as bait. They weaponized their own star. They deployed doomsday weapons in their home system. These aren't the actions of a young, inexperienced species. These are the tactics of survivors who will do absolutely anything to live. The session ended in silence. The counselors returned to their chambers with a new understanding. Humanity hadn't gotten lucky. They hadn't stumbled into victory. They had engineered it with cold precision. Meanwhile, in human space, life was returning to normal. New Perth was being rebuilt. The damaged parts of the fleet were being repaired. But beneath that normalcy, new weapons were being developed. New defenses were being established. Humanity was preparing for the next threat, whatever it might be. Ambassador Elena Kowalski sat in her office on the council station, reviewing reports. Her door opened without warning. Thexval entered, his fins in a position that indicated nervousness. "We need to talk," he said simply. Elena gestured to a chair. Thexval settled into the water-filled seat and was silent for a moment before speaking. "I've been reviewing the classified reports from the Human Studies Institute." "I know," Elena said. "We have excellent intelligence gathering." Thexval's fins twitched in what might have been amusement. "Of course you do. Ambassador, I need to know something honestly. Are we safe from you? Is the rest of the galaxy safe from humanity?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Do you mean physically safe? As in, will we conquer or destroy other species?" "Yes." "Then yes, you're safe," Elena replied. "We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to survive and be left alone to develop as we choose." "But," Thexval prompted, sensing there was more. "But if anyone threatens us or threatens species we've allied with, we will respond with overwhelming force," Elena finished. "We don't believe in proportional responses. We believe in making the cost of attacking us so high that nobody ever tries." Thexval nodded slowly. "That's what I was afraid of." "Ambassador, you've changed the balance of power in the galaxy." Before, there were the elder species who had wisdom and experience. There were younger species who had energy and innovation. Everyone had a place. Now there's humanity, who has the wisdom of 10,000 years of warfare and the energy of a young species. "We're not trying to upset anything," Elena said. "We just want to exist." "I believe you," Thexval replied. "But intent doesn't matter as much as capability. You've proven you can defeat threats that the rest of us couldn't. That makes you powerful. Power changes relationships whether you want it to or not." He stood to leave, then paused. "My government is going to officially request a defense treaty with humanity. Several other species will do the same. We're not doing this because we like you or trust you. We're doing it because we're afraid of everything else out there. And you've proven you can keep us safe." Elena nodded. "We'll consider it." After Thexval left, Elena sat alone in her office thinking about the future. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had forced that change by surviving, by fighting, by refusing to accept extinction. She thought about the Vraxis bioship fleeing to extragalactic space. She thought about the 17 species that wanted defense treaties. She thought about the classified reports describing humanity as a species-wide trauma response that had somehow learned to function effectively. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans were damaged, paranoid survivors who saw threats everywhere, but they were also alive, and that counted for something. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. It was from Earth's military command. They'd detected something at the edge of explored space. Unknown ships, potentially hostile. They wanted authorization to deploy long-range scouts. Elena approved the request and made a note to inform the council if the situation escalated. Then she opened another file, one that contained plans for new weapon systems still in development. Humanity was never going to be caught unprepared again. In the council chambers, the elder species were learning to adjust to their new reality. Humanity wasn't just another species joining galactic civilization. They were a force that would reshape how everyone thought about power, conflict, and survival. Some species saw opportunity in alliance with humanity. Others saw danger in having such aggressive neighbors. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had brought warfare to the stars. Not the honorable, regulated warfare that the elder species practiced. but the brutal, efficient, no-rules warfare that survivors used when extinction was the alternative. They had proven that youth and inexperience didn't matter if you were willing to do anything necessary to win. They had shown that technology and ancient wisdom meant nothing against a species that treated warfare as a science and war, crimes as military doctrine. The Galactic Council had watched in shock as humans won a war in 5 hours. But the real shock was the understanding that came after. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Vraxis. They had announced their arrival to the galaxy in the clearest possible way. They were survivors. They were warriors. They were the species that would rather die than surrender, and they were here to stay. In the years that followed, that truth would reshape galactic civilization. Some species would embrace humanity as allies. Others would fear them as threats. But none would forget the day they learned what humans were truly capable of. The elder species had ruled the galaxy through wisdom and age. Now they would share that power with a species whose only advantage was refusing to lose. And in a universe full of dangers, that might be the most important advantage of all.